Good morning.
Morning, sunshine. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Choking?
Uh,
Just had a coughing fit right before I started. Now my eyes
mm,
are watering. Oh, hi, I've missed you.
yeah. How have you been?
I
Sick.
don't know. I've seen better days, but I'm
Yeah.
surviving.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what you're drinking, but whatever that is it tea or coffee? But it looks amazing. Like that was the one thing I didn't get this morning.
Uh,
Oh, sorry. Woo.
okay. Mm.
So today we're supposed to talk about like 5 stats that I think all agents should have in their pockets at any given time.
Yeah.
They're like, you don't have to be a statistician. I know you're like a brainiac, so like you love to be prepared, and most of us agents love to be prepared, no matter if you're an academic or not. But like we feel like we have to know more than really our clients expect of us, right? Like we feel like we have to be prepared to answer any question. We feel like we have to be prepared. Like, do I really know the market? And most agents just wing it, to be honest with you. And that's our clients deserve better. Now, in a time where we have to insert our value, they're demanding more and more of us. Our clients
Mm.
are pickier, they're more savvy, they're more knowledgeable, they have access to all kinds of data with chat GPT and AI and everything. They have access to all kinds of things that we're not the gatekeepers of that information anymore. But they don't know the local market the way we do. They don't know the ins and outs of what to expect. They don't know some of the statistical data that they need to know to be informed. And Kim, you're gonna know some of these already because you've heard me talk several times before, and some very important stats that I always make sure my clients know. But there are 5 data points that I think all agents need to know, no matter whether they represent sellers or they represent buyers specifically. Um, but I do think that these are 5 that you should always have in your back, right? So the first one is like you should know the median home price. Like you need to know what right down the middle, what the median price is. A lot of people talk in averages, and averages, as you know, averages can throw off numbers quite a bit, right? But the median price tells you smack dab in the middle where the middle price is. Like um it separates the higher and the lower halves, right? And so the median price gives us a more accurate figure of what's smack dab in the middle versus the averages. You can have those outliers that really throw you off, right? And will throw off your data. Um, the median also will help you identify tendencies better than using averages, right? So I'll be very honest. I don't think there's a lot of training out there for a lot of agents that you get a lot of hands-on training, like how to write an offer, how to talk to a client, but there isn't a lot of training on what are some of the data that I need to know, that I need to be responsible for. So that's why I decided to do this particular workshop. Is I feel like these are at the very minimum some things that you need to keep in your back pocket at all times. So median home price is one. The second is how many days on the market. And I do use averages here because you can use the median, but I prefer the average days on the market here because typically I want to know what the average amount of time is. Obviously I can be speaking with a seller and say the average days on the market in your neighborhood is 32 days, but I could go under contract in one day in that neighborhood. If the house is priced properly and the condition is perfect, the averages don't really matter. But the averages do tell us, are you giving yourself enough time realistically to market and promote the house? So I have a coaching client right now who's working with an investor who put her on a very, very short timeline. Like she's giving her 6 weeks to sell the house. Well, my first question to her was, what are the average days on the market in the neighborhood? Because if you only have 6 weeks and the average days on the market is closer to 60 days or something, you're already behind, right? Like you may not be able to fulfill what the obligation is that she's hiring you to do if the timing, she's only giving you 6 weeks and the average days on the market is a lot longer than that. Specifically when you have a higher price property, a luxury listing or something that's in above the 1.5 million. And I know these days people have different definitions of luxury all across the country, but in Nashville or in Middle Tennessee, I still think anything over a million is luxury, even though a million doesn't buy you much in Nashville these days, right? But in other markets, luxury could be 500,000. But in any market where less than 10% of the listings are like above that price, that price range, I would say your average days on the market are typically going to be a lot higher. So if the average days on the market to sell a $2 million house are closer to 6 months, why would you take a 3 month listing? Why would you take a 2 month listing if the averages are telling you that it's going to take you longer to sell that? The same thing with land. So raw land, typically we like to get those listings for a year because they can take every bit of 9 to 10 months to sell. Now, you can have a lot that flies off the market that day if it's beautiful and it's the right lot, it has a stream going through it, or it's the topography is perfect, or it's just in a location that's really desirable. Of course, that's going to sell quickly, but raw dirt is a lot harder to sell and usually takes longer. And so your average days on the market for luxury properties for dirt is going to be a little bit longer. So you want to make sure, are you in tune with what the average days on the market is in that area? I like to tell agents, especially if you're going for a listing appointment, you should have the data for the average days on the market for that neighborhood, but also that zip code, right? Or that county, because those could vary differently. Like the neighborhood might be a little harder to sell. And Kim, I'll give you an example just because you're here. Like in Middle Tennessee, Lenox Village is a neighborhood that's kind of like a planned development. It's like Brentwood area where Brentwood and Antioch meet each other. Um, Almost touching Nolansville, it gets to.
I used to live there.
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. But that neighborhood, for whatever reason, I call it like the pit of hell. Like for whatever reason, the houses do not appreciate like everywhere else in Middle Tennessee, everywhere else in that zip code, everywhere else in that county. This big subdivision is almost like it has a cloud over it. And the days on the market are longer. The prices don't appreciate at the same rate as everything else around it. I had a townhouse once in there. It was 199. Like this was a long time ago, obviously. It was listed for 199, and I probably sold it 5 times, but I could never get it to appraise higher than 200,000, no matter what. And there were townhouses all over everywhere outside of this neighborhood that were at this point now 215 and 219 and 220. But I could not get Lenox Village townhouses to go over 199 unless I had a cash buyer that was willing to pay it, right? But for whatever reason, that neighborhood tended to be like what I called the black cloud. I could not get the numbers to appreciate the way they did everywhere else. So when I was representing buyers, that was a really important statistic that I needed to show them because I was concerned. I was concerned that if they were expecting the same rate of appreciation everywhere else, you weren't going to get it in this neighborhood. And that for whatever reason, this neighborhood, the days on the market were longer, the average price per square foot was lower, and that I could not get, you know, I was worried about them having expectations that I couldn't meet because I didn't know how it was going to change. And so I feel like you really need to arm people specifically if you've got a neighborhood like that that just doesn't match the data, then you need to make sure you also are looking outside of that neighborhood and giving them the other data points that, hey, outside of this neighborhood, this is what we're seeing. Outside of this neighborhood, in the same zip code, in the same elementary school. Remember, I do elementary schools because they're a smaller um, market or smaller circle than a middle school or a high school. Those districts are much larger, right? And so, again, sometimes you have to step outside of that neighborhood. If you're in a condo development or if it's in a townhouse, you cannot go outside of the neighborhood. Typically, those comps are only going to come from like kind. And if there's data in the neighborhood, they want to use it. So, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck. But I do feel like you need to arm your client with, hey, this is what it looks like in this subdivision, but outside of this subdivision, let's talk about what that looks like, right? When you have data points like this, and I know we haven't covered all 5 of them yet, but when you have data points like this, you are immediately establishing yourself as a professional who's in tune with the market. You have your pulse on what's happening around you. And when you can talk intelligently about the data and the stats and the averages or the medians, you are already separating yourself from thousands of other agents who are not going to do that kind of research. That's sad, unfortunately, but it's true. And so if you're just looking for a leg up on how to get an advantage, you don't have to be the, the smartest person in the room, but you do have to know some specific data points that are going to make you look way more prepared and much more smarter. And you will be, because you're going to have the information, right? You're going to know what the averages are. So I definitely love to compare the median home price in two neighborhoods. So especially if there's a neighborhood close by, because you can see, especially all over Middle Tennessee, you're going to have drastic changes from one neighborhood to the other. And that's where that Lenox Village example comes in, is that the median home price is different. If you step outside that neighborhood and you just go around the corner, 2 miles up the road in the Burkett place, you're going to see something totally different than you do in Lenox Village, right? And I get it's a different city, but I'm just saying, like, it's so crazy to me that this little cloud just hung over Lenox Village for some reason. I don't know. Was that your experience too, though, that you didn't feel like it appreciated the same?
I wasn't super informed about surrounding areas when we moved in 2018.
Sure.
I mean, and what I saw too was my husband bought it before I was in the picture, before 2008. So I did look at how this, how our townhouse was doing.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, I mean, we were happy with how much it had appreciated beyond what he paid for it. I think he paid like maybe 220 for it, pre 2008, and we were able to sell it for 370 something.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But
that's just one data point. I mean,
and that's interesting too. Like I said, I mean, of course, we had a crazy, incredible appreciation period in Middle Tennessee, but did it appreciate at the same rate as other townhouses nearby, right? And that's the question. Just in that neighborhood, I did not feel like they did. And so I could just look at the data all day long and say, I'm just not seeing the same appreciation in that neighborhood. And so it was a concern for me, for any of my buyer clients, but also a concern for some of my seller clients that were expecting the same type of returns that some of their friends nearby got. And unfortunately, I can't do that. I can't get you that unless you're just going to sell for only cash. That's the only way I can do it. And then you've got to have some value there to justify it, right? So let's talk about days on market real quick, because I do think it's important. Obviously, you're going to take the average days on market, and most MLSs are going to calculate what that is for you, especially. But remember, this data is all skewed by the user, right? Just like statistics can be manipulated any way you want them to be, to paint whatever picture you want it to paint. You have a responsibility, I think, when you're presenting this data to your clients, to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, right? And a lot of agents are just not skilled in how to really look at something and say, this is a good comp or this isn't, right? This is very similar. It's so similar that I would say this is the same comp that an appraiser would pick, right? Like, most agents don't have that skill set because that's not what they've ever been trained to do. Most agents do not have the training that says, let me give you an address. I want you to run comps for me. And then they don't get the feedback that says, this is a good comp, this isn't a good comp. The only feedback they get is in a market where your appraisal comes back low. And by that point, it's too late, right? You're in trouble. But that's unfortunately the only feedback that they get a lot of times as agents, is there is not someone that's saying, hey, this is a good comp and let me tell you why. Or no, that's not a good comp and this is why I can't use it. You learn that through trial and error, only typically when there's a problem, right? That's too late. Your clients deserve better than that. They deserve competency from you to be able to say, I use these parameters, right? And that's why I teach across the board, plus or minus 300 square feet, plus or minus 5 years on the age, right? And then the other thing is, again, I teach you concentric circles. Stay as close in the neighborhood as you possibly can, preferably the same model, obviously there's softballs. I call them softballs and curveballs. The softball is going to be if you were imagining a new construction neighborhood where you have 5 models to choose from. I want the same model as comps, obviously, because it's going to be pretty much the same house except for upgrades, right? But we don't live in a world like that, obviously. And so then you get softballs, which or curveballs, which are like, it's kind of similar, but it's not similar. There's not anything like it. This is a very rare property. And it becomes much harder to price the property, right? But if you stay in those concentric circles as close to the same type of property, same exterior, same type of flooring, I see baby, like the same type floor plan, same similar square footage, plus or minus like built within the same like 2 or 3 year span or 4 year span, you're going to get a lot closer to being true comps than when you're trying to make the square peg fit in the round hole. And that's what a lot of agents do is they do what I call cherry picking, which is they pull the list of comps and they just click 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 click, and they don't dig into the comps to really see, is this a good comp? Like, did I look at the interior pictures? Did I call the listing agent and ask any questions? Do I have enough information that's in the MLS to really help me decide, is this a comp that I really want, right? And so I think you as an agent, you owe it to your career, you owe it to your clients to really learn the skill set. If you need to sit down with an appraiser or pick an appraiser's brain, if you ever get an opportunity where there's a meet the appraiser kind of class, take it, go to it, because they're going to give you way more insight about how to select, how to get better at selecting comps and what their um, guidelines are about how far they can go, like how many miles away, and what's their age limit that they can't even consider that to be a comp. Like, I want to know those parameters because that helps me be a better agent when I am selecting comps to say, hey, this is going to work or this isn't going to work, or I don't want this to become a problem. Too many agents cherry pick through the list because they're trying to get the data to reflect the price that the seller wants. I want you to imagine how dangerous that is, right? Where you are just cherry picking through the things to manipulate the data so that it shows the average sales price is X and the average price per square foot is Y, so that you can then manipulate and multiply the square footage and say, okay, I can justify 450 when really the house is not worth 450, right? You're setting the seller up for disappointment. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. You are costing them time, which could cost them thousands of dollars. And then if the appraisal comes in low and you can't refute it because there are no better comps for you to pick and the appraiser did their job, what are you going to do then? The whole deal falls apart. The seller puts the house back on or takes the house off the market, and then you work for free. So this is a skill that I don't think a lot of agents spend a lot of time learning, but it's really paramount to what we do. Our clients rely on us to give them accurate data so that we can properly advise them about where the market says their house should be priced, right? The unfortunate part is that just not a lot of agents, especially if they got a license in the last 3 to 5 years, they did not have to be great at pricing properties because they sold anyway. We didn't have any inventory. It didn't matter the condition. It didn't matter where it was located. It didn't matter if it was missing a roof. They sold, right? Like, I mean, that's I'm hyperbole, but I'm just saying, like, you didn't have to do a whole lot and it still sold. We're not in that market now. Our buyers are so picky right now. They are like the ones that are in the market are serious, but they are coming to negotiate. They are coming to ask for things. They are coming to scrutinize over a house a lot more. They want and are demanding more inspection items to be fixed. Whereas, like I said, the last 3 to 5 years, they kind of took on some of that responsibility themselves because they just wanted to buy a house. They just needed to get one. There wasn't a lot to choose from. And now there's more inventory to choose from, so they're going to be pickier. So, one of the things that you need to talk about when you're talking about days on market is the things that that influence days on market. So, your condition for sure. Is the house in the same condition? If we want to use Bob and Sally's house around the corner as a comparison, that is a great comp, but they sold their house in 2 days. Is their grass green and luscious? Do they have fertilizer come every, twice a year? Do they have, upgrades that your house doesn't? Did they spend the money? Have they done all the home maintenance around the house for the last 5, 7 years that other people haven't done? There are a lot of things that influence, and condition is a big one. And unfortunately, sometimes our sellers believe their condition to be better than it is, right? And so we may have to actually show them some listings. You may have to go take your seller to go preview listings that are under contract or that are pending or that are even currently active to show them that might not just be the pictures. Remember, we're really good at making houses look incredible online through pictures, right? But sometimes when you step inside the door, you see something totally different than you would that day that the photographer came, right? And so I have had to take some sellers through some active listings or even some pending listings just so that they can have a reality check that is not coming from me. They need to see it with their own eyes. How do you feel like your house compares to this house? You can do that in pictures, but it tells a very different story when you parade them through the house. I want you to take notice, especially if you've got a house in the neighborhood that went under contract very quickly and the days on the market are a little bit longer in your market. Take your sellers through that house and say, I want you to notice, how is it staged? Like, how did they present it? Did they have music playing when they're during showings and all the lights were on? Is the dog still yapping trying to bite my ankles when I come through the living room, right? Like, condition makes a big difference. But so I definitely want you to talk about condition. I want you to talk about pricing strategy as well. When you are arriving at your list price, your strategy of where you price it matters. Are you on the cusp of the next pricing bracket? So like if somebody is pre-approved up to 450, are you at 429, which means only people who are qualified over 425 are also looking, or are you on the cusp at 419 so that you can catch the people that are 425 and below? Where you price it really matters sometimes because you might be cutting off a whole group of buyers just because you picked a number that's kind of random. You'll also see some agents out there that will do some what I call funny numbers on their list price. They'll list it at like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 on purpose, just so that it stands out, because everybody's house is listed at 419 or 429 or 420 at those little cutoffs, right? So sometimes you can be a little bit more creative with your pricing too by picking a number that's abnormal, that really doesn't split the cusp and allows you to kind of stick out and get more attention. But I want you to talk about that with your clients, especially your sellers that aren't quite getting the memo when your idea of staging and my idea of staging are very different. You sometimes have to show them, right? You definitely want to talk about seasonal varieties. Are there different times of the year that impact the days on the market, or did something happen in the area that impacted the market? So again, in Middle Tennessee, if we got more than an inch of snow and the whole apocalypse happened and the whole town shuts down for 10 days, that impacts your data, right? Nobody was buying anything for 10 days. People couldn't get out and look at houses. In 2010, we had the 100-year flood. How did that impact the market, right? People couldn't get out. They couldn't get insurance. There's anomalies that might have happened or occurred in your market, but you just want to make sure that you talk to your clients about how that could impact the days on the market or how the data could be skewed a little bit. I always, anytime talking about data with my clients, I am always very quick to point out to them that this data is self-entered, right? We as agents have the ability to control what data gets put in the MLS, and it's manipulated by us, meaning there's not, in some states, like in Virginia, at least in the part of Virginia that I sold in, you could not touch the MLS yourself other than to search for things, meaning you couldn't enter your own listings. You could not close out your own listings. Office managers had to do that, admin people, because those people had been trained by the owners of the MLS about how to do it so that there was less anomalies, so that there were less errors, so that there's less manipulation of the data. How many times have you looked up a listing and saw what I call funny math, meaning that the list price has been changed after they get an offer to try to influence the appraiser? All the time. Or how many times have you pulled up a listing that you were involved in and you went to go check to make sure it was closed out correctly, and they didn't even put that the seller paid $5,000 in closing costs. They're not reporting the data accurately, right? All of that skews the information. But then when I pull that data and I go talk to my seller and I say, I pulled 10 closings that happened in the last month in your neighborhood, and only one of them paid seller closing costs. You're not giving me an accurate reflection of what's happening in the market when you are not accurately reporting the data, right? And so I start out a lot of these conversations with my clients just saying this is self reported, it can be self manipulated. I dive deep into the data the best that I can, but I want you to understand that there are going to be some errors along the way. There's going to be some outliers, there's going to be some marginal changes, there's going to be some, this is not 100% true data because we all have access to it and the ability to, you know, edit it and change it, and that means you're going to get some bad data, right? For your fact finder clients, the data is going to be really important to them, right? That's black, show me in black and white. When I used to sell real estate to Marine Corps fighter pilots and doctors, they want to see it. Don't tell me that the house is priced appropriately and just think I'm going to trust you. I need to see it on a graph. I need to see it on a chart. And in academics, like you need to show it to me, right? I can't just, I do trust you, but I need to see it for myself. And so, in a market where we just came out of in Nashville, where, people were paying stupid money over list price, like the data went out the window. Nobody cared because they just wanted to buy a house, right? But we're not in that market anymore. And people now are going to be going back to that data during that crazy time. And they're going to see that people paid 120% for, over list price. So they paid, 110% over list price. But is the data an accurate reflection of what happened? You might have to make some phone calls, is what I'm getting at. You may have to call some listing agents and verify, hey, I saw you close this out. It says that there were no seller contributions. I just want to verify that that was correct because so many people just put zero there. And I'm sorry, if the seller paid $20,000 in closing costs, that is not an accurate sales price, right? That's not an accurate picture of the data if you put zero, right? You're telling me that that seller basically took $20,000 less, but that's not how it's reflected in the MLS, right? So I just want you to make sure that you're explaining to your clients that I do the best I can with the data that I have available to me, but because we are self-reported and it can be manipulated by the agents, sometimes I do see some funny math happening, some funny realtor antics with the stats. The next data point that you need to know is, so we talked about the median home price days on the market. The next one is your inventory levels. Like how many months supply do you have in your market? Why is that an important data point? Why do you think that's an important data?
It tells you whether you're in a buyer's market or a seller's market.
Correct. Yes. So obviously, if we are under, I say under 4 months supply, we're absolutely in a seller's market, right? Like we don't have a lot of inventory. Anything more than, I would say if you have more than 6 months supply, you're swinging the other direction to a buyer's market, and that's pretty much what's happening in Nashville. But now it's also by price range, right? Because there are houses in Middle Tennessee that in a certain price bracket are flying off the market still with multiple offers and all kinds of things. They're not asking for concessions. But then you get into maybe luxury and it's maybe 1.5 million to 2 million. Those are not flying off the market. Those are still sitting, they're sitting sometimes for 6 months, 180 days. And then there's other neighborhoods where that same price range, they fly off in 4 days. It's just dependent, very dependent on the product and the house. But your inventory level also tells a lot to a buyer about what to expect in the market. Should they be, is it okay for them to offer less than list price? Is it okay to ask for closing costs? When I say, is it okay? This is a very true story that I cannot believe happened, but this is just how out of tune some people are in this business with very important data that I think they should know. And this was a lender He actually was very involved in real estate lending. He's a big investor in Spring Hill now, but back in the day, he was buying a new house for his family, and the market was pretty hot in Middle Tennessee. You still was not a time where you could ask for closing costs or ask for reductions. I mean, you had to come in with a super strong offer. And if he was in lending truly, like, he should know that, because I mean, you're looking at contracts all day, you know what gets accepted, what doesn't get accepted. So I mean, you should be in tune with what is okay to ask for. I remember he got on a Facebook group and was really bashing his agent because he wrote an offer and he was so upset that he lost out on the offer. And people started asking him more questions like, what was your offer? Like, what did you ask for? And he proceeded to tell them that he asked for closing costs and he didn't think it was that big of a deal. And the reality is that nobody was paying closing costs at that time. So when I say, is it okay? You as the buyer can ask for whatever you want. You can write your offer however you want it to. But it's our job and our responsibility to help guide you to what the market is going to bear. Like, what is really a competitive offer in your marketplace? What is likely that the seller is going to accept, right? And the failure to give that buyer that advice and that guidance is also setting them up for failure and disappointment. When they fall in love with a house, they write an offer that they think is a great offer, and you didn't give them enough information to say, hey, looking at the data, I can see that no seller in the last 6 months have paid closing costs, right? According to the data. I can also see that every seller got 101% of list price in the last 60 closings. So what would make you think that you can come in and offer 91% of list price? Which leads me to my next data point. The list price to sales price ratio is the one I talk about a lot, because it does indicate to you what the sellers are willing to negotiate. Like, how much are they willing to negotiate? That data point alone is really important when you have buyers that are trying to lowball, investors that are trying to get a deal. Everybody wants a deal, right? But I've used that data point many times to help my buyer come up with a better price that the market actually might allow, right? That a seller might actually accept. So the list price to sales price ratio is going to tell a better story. It's also important with a seller, that when you are setting your list price, you have to talk about the list price to sales price ratio, because they start counting their money from the moment you tell them what the list price is, right? They start calculating what their net is, how much they owe on it and what's left. And after all your fees and everything, this is what I'm going to walk away with, even though that's not what the house has sold for. So you might have to come back and ask for a price reduction. They immediately start thinking that they've lost $20,000. You never had $20,000 because the house hadn't sold. But in their mind, they've already started calculating what they're going to walk away from. So any deviation off of that first initial list price in their mind is money lost. But if you go into that conversation presenting to them the list price to sales price ratio and say, we're going to list here, but the expectation is that we're probably going to end up around here, right? And that's really the number you should be focusing on, not our list price, because every buyer does want a deal. Most buyers are going to want to come in and ask for a less, offer you less than list price. But if I don't have that conversation with my seller, the minute they get their first low offer, they're mad. And who are they mad at? They're mad at you. All because you didn't have the conversation that says, hey, this is where we're starting, but this is where I expect us to land, right? This is where we're starting so that we have some room to negotiate, because what I've seen is a lot of buyers are coming in less than list price, if that's the case. But you have to have the conversation about what they should expect. If you don't, they're going to expect 100% of list price. And when they get their first offer that's only $5,000 less, they should be doing cartwheels, but they're not, because they feel like they got screwed out of $5,000, right? It's an important conversation to have in the beginning. This is all about setting expectations and providing these data points set proper expectations. You do less cleanup, you do less apologizing, you are less the one at fault when you set proper expectations on the front end and show them the data that backs up what you're saying. I have also used the list price to sales price ratio. Again, going back to a buyer, when most buyers are trying to get a deal and they want to just, oh, I know this house is listed at 450, but can we offer 410? What? Where did you come up with that number? Right? You just threw it out. You just pulled it out somewhere. If I'm trying to get my buyer to make a more reasonable offer, I'm going to pull out that list price to sales price ratio and show them if no seller has taken less than 98% of list price, that would be a price of X. Why are you trying to offer Y? Right? The conversation that gets had over and over and over again when you are trying, if you don't have these data points to show them, I promise you what's going to be said. The buyer is going to say, oh, or think. They may not say it, but they're going to think it. Oh, you just want me to pay more money so you make more money, right? So I always, anytime a buyer comes in here and I really need them here because that's what the market is probably going to accept, or the seller at least is going to be willing to entertain. That's the scary part too. If you write too low of an offer, are you pissing off the seller that they don't even want to talk to you? You may not get a second chance to negotiate with the seller. You might turn them off with such a low offer that they don't even want, they don't think you're serious, right? If you, I was going to say, if you fail to give them that, oh, the conversation is you just want to make more money. I tell every time this, and I have had clients straight out tell me that to my face. You just want me to offer more money so you make more money. And I have to explain to them, listen, the difference between you paying $425 and $435 is about $8 in my commission. I have two boys that are now 19 and 22 or 23. That $8 is not going to feed one of them, right? So trust me, it's not about me trying to earn more money. And I have to put it in perspective like that. Like, again, the difference between what you offered and what I'm trying to get you to offer is about $12 in commission to me, or $28 in, whatever it is. It's not the 13,000 that they're thinking of. You have to break it down for them sometimes like that. Honey, the difference is only $22 to me, right? But if your offer is not accepted, I'm not even going to get the $22. So why does it matter? Right? It's I don't want you to have your heart set on the house and then not being properly advised. I don't want you to be that guy on Facebook talking about how your agent didn't properly prepare you and your offer didn't get accepted and you're mad and you turn to the internet goblins to give you advice when I'm the one that should be delivering that advice to you. I'm the one that you should be trusting when I give you the data and I show you what has worked in the market. I'm the one you should be relying on to advise you to make the best offer. The best offer is not about which one I make the most money off of. The best offer is the one you have the best chance of getting accepted. Right? That's where our advice is coming from. It is not about the extra $8 or $6 or $22. Trust me, that doesn't even buy shoes for my two heathens. Right? Like, so I always try to make a joke out of it because, again, they always think we're overpaid anyway. And so I always try to make a joke, just like, listen, that wouldn't feed my two boys for a week. So that's not where my advice is coming from. My advice is coming from, I want to see you get excited. I want to see your house, your offer get accepted. I want to see your family grow up in this house. And if I don't properly advise you, I'm afraid somebody else is going to win. And if you're okay with that, and that's the other question I always ask them, would you be okay if you laid your head on the pillow tonight and you woke up tomorrow and found out that somebody else got it over $1,000? Would that break your heart, or would you be okay with that? Because I'll tell you right now, I've sat across from a husband and a wife or spouses and said, you know, are you okay with telling your wife she can't have her dream house over $1,000? And they're like, or, I'm manipulative too. So I'll say, hey, I think your wife is already envisioning those kids running around in that backyard, and you're going to have to tell her tomorrow that you're not over $1,000, that those kids are never going to see that backyard over 1,000. You have to put it in perspective for them. I say manipulative, but I'm saying that's only because I get called a used car salesman, by the public. But I'm just saying, you have to put it in perspective for them and make sure that they understand where you're coming from, why you're giving this advice. Kim, were you going to say something?
I think sometimes it's just important to bring them back to, why are they doing this?
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
let's remember, put these things in perspective. Is this worth $1,000 for you not
Right.
to get the place that you've been working so hard to
And
make
we've
an
been
offer
looking at
on?
houses for a year, like, aren't you tired of looking at houses? I know I am. I agree with you, but the perspective is let's revisit why you wanted to buy a bigger house. Let's revisit why we're even shopping for a house to begin with, right? Or let's revisit, does this house check all the boxes? The other thing is that most buyers have an expectation that the house is going to check 100% of the boxes. If it's not perfect, I'm not buying it. And I've been doing this for a very long time, as you guys know, since dinosaurs roamed the earth. And the reality is that most houses don't fit 100% of the boxes. We're really looking for about 90, 91%, right? If it checks those boxes, then that's probably about as good as you're going to get, unless you're going to build a custom home yourself, which God bless you, right? All the selections, too many choices for me, too many selections to make.
And even then, you haven't walked through it when you decide on everything, and then when you walk through, you may still have problems.
Correct. Correct. I saw something the other day where somebody showed a piece of building lumber, like for framing from 1970 something, and then one from like whatever, I don't remember what it was. Just the quality of the lumber and how much that has changed. I was shocked. Well, I already knew it anyway, because again, I love older houses for that reason. They feel more solid, they feel more secure, they're usually better constructed, unfortunately. Um, but I just looking at those two pieces of wood and seeing the difference in quality between what you can buy now versus what you could buy in the 70s, it was eye opening to me. I was actually pretty shocked. Not that I believe everything I see on the internet, but I was just like, man, I hadn't thought about that. The price to income ratio is kind of an interesting data point as well. That's really if you're just trying to determine affordability. So, are the prices in line with your income? We already know that in Middle Tennessee, that's a horrible data point that I don't know I would pull up for anybody, just because it's not going to paint a pretty picture. They're not in line with incomes. And most markets around the country, the housing prices are not in line with the income. So that's a data point I don't love, but it is one that people feel like you should be able to talk about in terms of how affordable is the housing in the market that you live in, especially if you deal with a lot of relocation buyers. That is a data point that they want to know. What's the cost of living like where you live? And can you talk intelligently about the pricing? Is there affordable housing? And the reason I'm saying this is because I've seen forums where somebody said, hey, I'm looking to move to Nashville, my budget's 250. And about 1,000 people jump on and go, good luck, that was 2010, you're never going to find anything. Well, the truth be told is there are still some houses 250, but they might not be in Nashville proper. They might be in Ashland City. They might be in further out, more remote places, whatever that is. And the reality is, are you positive about the availability of any affordable housing, or are you the naysayer that goes, well, good luck, that was 2010, they want their prices back? If you are negative about it, of course that's the kind of energy you're putting out. Why would someone want to work with you, right? Now, again, 250 might not be your budget you want to work with, that's fine, but I'm just saying, are you in tune with, is there affordable housing somewhere in your market? Do you know where there is affordable housing? um, One of the things I learned early in my career was that there are community grants out there that are initiatives for affordable housing. There are projects that are being developed for lower income people that are not just Habitat for Humanity houses. There are other developments and projects all over that are funded by community grants or funded by third party grants that to try to help with the affordable housing initiative. And are you even aware of them? You don't have to specialize in them. You don't even have to sell them, but are you just aware of what's being built? And is there affordable housing? And do you know in your market? So this is for a brand new agent. I would say, if someone gave you a price range, could you identify areas of town in your market that would support that price range? Right. So if I did say my budget was 250, can you come up with a list of 5 or 6 places in your market that you could identify where they could afford that? I think that's a super important information to know, because Again, a lot of buyers don't know specifically why they've pinpointed an area. They just have heard that's where I should live, right? But and let me tell the story. I had a client once that they were hell bent and determined to live in Sumner County, and they were looking in Hendersonville. And they just kept telling me over and over and over again, we want to live in Hendersonville. This is where we're looking. And they just kept sending me all these listings in Hendersonville to look at. And so one day we were looking at houses, and I finally asked, you know, can I ask you why Hendersonville? I should have asked that in the very beginning, but again, I was asking other questions. Um, can I ask you why you pinpointed Hendersonville? And their response to me was, oh, well, we just have to be within 30 minutes of his work. And people told us that Hendersonville is where we should live. What? Hold on. You just have to be 30 minutes within his work. I've got 17 other places we could be looking at. Right. So the point is like, are you asking enough questions to help them identify where they want to live? Those people ended up living in Spring Hill and they love it there. They're so happy there. They're like so ingrained in the sports there with their kids and the neighborhood. I mean, they are so happy there. I don't know that they would have been as equally happy if they had just stayed in Hendersonville because that's what came up on their radar. I have another story where a client told me they kept giving me this one zip code, and this is the only zip code they would consider. And I was like, can I? And anytime somebody is very specific about an area that they want to be, I always ask, can you tell me a little bit more why? Sometimes it's I have a special needs kid, or I have, we've got health issues. We need to stay close to our doctor, or whatever the thing. So I really want to uncover why is this zip code so important to you? Well, come to find out, they needed to be within so many minutes of Whole Foods. Are you kidding me? I have 4 other zip codes that are within that many minutes of Whole Foods. I need to know that. We were able to find another house that was about $400,000 cheaper than what they were looking at in their zip code. And I'm telling you, they still to this day rave about Laura helped us find this house. We didn't even know that we were excluding these areas. I mean, you have to ask the right questions. So, again, can you identify areas in your market that are in certain price ranges? Do you have enough knowledge to know, hey, if somebody gives me this budget, these are the areas that typically, and if you just spend any amount of time in your MLS, you will learn that. You will learn what price ranges you can find things. Do a search for yourself in different brackets all over the various counties that you represent or that you serve, and look and see, make notes of the neighborhoods in certain price ranges so that that's also content that you can put out. Are you looking for a house under 400,000 or under 500,000 in Middle Tennessee? Here's a list. Here's a reel. I could see it right now, or a TikTok. Here's a list of all the neighborhoods of houses that are under 500,000. I mean, that's not the kind of content most agents are putting out, right? But is that important to the buyer? Absolutely. They don't know what they can afford, especially when people online are telling them good luck. That's 2010, right? There's nothing here for you in that price range. All you're going to get is a trailer. No, I can show you lots of other things, right? So I just want you to think about, how do I learn what's available in the various price ranges? Spend some time in your MLS. Set yourself up on some searches in some price ranges so that you can become familiar with which areas outside of that really expensive bubble, where else can you look to give them options, right? And then the other thing is, don't wait until you're 52 houses in to ask, why Hendersonville, right? Tell me more about why you picked this place. That should be in the very beginning of your conversation when you're having that consultation with the buyer. Let's talk about why you've identified this area. And is this the only area considering? Tell me why, right? Because if they could give me more information, I've got more options, right? Especially if they're frustrated with affordability, especially if they're frustrated with, I don't want to drive an hour to get to work. I've got to come up with some other options, right? And you have to be in the know of what neighborhoods and which areas are going to be in the price range that they're looking at, right? So I think that's an important, it's not a data point, but it's an important thing that you should know, is where's the affordability in your market. I think I covered them all. Let's see. Median home price, we talked about. Days on the market, your inventory, like how many homes are available, And then we talked about the price to income ratio, affordability, and the sales price to list price ratio. Any other data point that you think is important, Kim, that we didn't talk about?
I mean,
There's one more I can think of that I didn't have on my list. The
maybe,
appreciation rate.
sure,
Yeah.
that would be one. Maybe dollars per square foot.
Yes. The average price per square foot, but that only works. And the reason I didn't have that on my list is because in some markets, everything is priced price per square foot. And that is what it is based on. It is, if you have a 2,200 square foot house, it is $162 a square foot. And that's it. Right. And that's what they go on. In Nashville, in my experience in Middle Tennessee, they are not priced that way. That is a guideline on an average price per square foot that you can kind of look at and compare. But so many upgrades and changes and nuances are going to affect that. You could have two houses side by side, like in the urban core, especially. The price per square foot is going to vary different so drastically based on the products that's built, right? So one house might be somewhat more luxury finishes and the price per square foot is 400 and something, but the house next door is only $230 a square foot. So I don't talk in price per square foot so much in generalities for when I'm covering multiple market conversations because of that. In South Carolina, everything was a price per square foot. I can tell you down to the dollar what the price per square foot could be in that area in the low country where I sold. Virginia didn't work that way either, especially when you have revitalizing neighborhoods, when you have gentrification, when you have them knocking down buildings. It just doesn't always calculate as a price per square foot. However, your builders, your developers, they are always going to operate on a price per square foot, right? They're going to calculate what can I build? How much is it going to cost me to build a 2,200 square foot ranch, right? They know what that costs. And so they are very in tune with price per square foot. And in some areas of the country, things are priced. I use it as a guide. It's never a black and white calculation where I can take 2,200 square feet and multiply it by 236 and get a price, right? It will help me get a range. And that's usually what's happening when I'm giving prices anyway, is I don't give a price, I give a range. And I'm typically within $10,000 range. Sometimes I'll go 15. It just depends on what I'm comparing it to. But that way you don't get backed into a corner. When you pick a specific price, like I never tell a seller you should list at 425. I'm always going to give them a range. Your house should be somewhere between 420 and 430. Where do you feel like it should be based on what I've shown you? Where on the range do you feel like it should be? And all sellers are going to want to be at 430, right? But when I point out, given that your lack of upgrades, given the condition, you don't want to spend any money on renovating anything or repairing anything, you want to sell it as is, we might not be able to get 430 for it, right? We might need to go. And when you present it in that way, they become much more reasonable to accepting 420 something versus 430. But if I walk in and I say, you should list it at 425, and someone else comes in and does a listing presentation and they say, oh, you should list at 429, the seller is going to say, well, they can get me more money, so I'm going to go with that agent. And that's why I always say I don't want you to hire me based on the price. I want you to hire me based on, my spiel. So, that line. But I'm just saying I don't ever give a flat price. I give a range, and then I let the seller have some ownership of where on that range they think they should be. And then with some guidance, we usually come up with a price together on the range, right? But that will allow you to not be backed into a corner on a specific number. And giving them a range gives them more power to choose where do they want that to be priced. And then you also can help guide them because where on the range compared, because again, they're very emotional about it. They put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. They brought their babies home. They have their dog buried in the backyard, all the things that they think are worth money, right? We did find a pet buried in our backyard with a plaque and everything. I'm like, man, don't you think you should tell somebody there's like dead animals buried in your yard? But I'm just saying they think it's worth a lot more than sometimes it is. And the things that they think have value, I sent an agent to do a listing appointment like to meet with a seller on my behalf. It's like one of my mentees that I have, right? And so I sent her to go to this house, and the woman flat out told her on the phone that she had just painted the whole house and that she had replaced the flooring. And she'd done all these upgrades, is what she called them, upgrades. And when the agent got to the house, of course, the lady has been chain smoking for like 20 years in the house. She had not painted a single room, so she lied. We have the pictures from the previous MLS. Nothing had been painted. She still had bright pink and bright blue and a shrine to her son, who unfortunately had passed away, like painted on the wall and all kinds of stuff in the house. And the flooring had not been replaced in probably 15 years. So her idea of the upgrade was that I replaced the flooring 15 years ago, right? So these are the kinds of conversations that you have to have and say, well, I know that you put some money into the house, but let's talk about what you've done recently. Like, what have you done in this decade? Might be the new question that I have to ask. At the end of the day, I want you, a lot of these the data points and the statistics that I want you to have prepared are going to help you be more knowledgeable. They're going to help you talk more intelligently about what's happening in the market. You're going to help guide your clients about better expectations using the data. Make sure that you are giving the caveat of that this is data that can be skewed, it can be manipulated, it's self-reported, it's as accurate as I have access to. But I always give the caveat that I'm not responsible for all the data. I'm only responsible for, it is important to me. I definitely call and check and verify with the agents to make sure that the data is not skewed, but I can't guarantee that. But I'm always making sure that they understand the purpose of, let me talk to you about why I'm giving you this statistic, why I feel like you need to know this. At the end of the day, your clients must know that you're on their team. If you're trying to guide them to a better offer, you know this because I train you, but like I am always saying, I'm on your team, I'm on your team, I'm on your team to my client, because that's the first thing they start to question when you give a little pushback. They start to question, well, whose side is she on? You're supposed to be looking out for me, but the pushback that I'm giving you is because I want you to be successful. I want your kids to be running around in that backyard. I don't want you and your wife fighting for 3 months over the house that you were too cheap to buy, or that you tried to save a couple $1,000s. And for some clients, when I ask that question, if you wake up tomorrow and find out that you could have had it for $2,000 more, would you be upset? For most of them, the answer is yes, I would be upset. And you can help guide them to a better offer. But without phrasing it like that, and you're just basically like, tell me what you want to do, I'll fill in the blank. What value are you bringing to the client? Anybody can fill in a blank, but are you properly advising them, consulting them, giving them data points that help them feel more secure about the offer that they're writing, helping them feel like I had good advice from my agent? I have been on the other side of the table trying to negotiate with clients who their agents have given them advice, bad advice. And that's the guy that got on Facebook saying, like, I'm pissed off. We wrote a beautiful offer and it didn't get accepted. Sometimes your beautiful offer is not enough. It just isn't, right? But did I give the best advice that I can to help my clients be successful? Do they know that I'm on their team, and the reason I'm telling them it's not for the extra $8? I promise you, it's not, right? So I want you to be very familiar with these data points when you are talking with your buyers and your sellers, explaining to them why you're giving them the list price to sales price ratio, explaining to them what that means, helping use that data to guide their actions to more favorable offers and to guide their expectations so that they're not mad at you. Because when they get mad at you is when they tend to file lawsuits. And we don't want that, right? You want happy clients that refer you business forever and ever and ever, right? And the best clients, the happiest clients are the ones that you properly prepare. And the best way you can prepare them is with data and information and explain to them why you want them to know it, right? Why it's important. I hope that that's helpful. I hope that, it gives you a little bit more arm yourself with a little bit more information. Again, if you're not sure, all of these data points can be found in the MLS by studying it, which is why, again, there is no routine in this business. We have to establish some routine and some regimen for ourselves. And every single day, one of my daily activities is to scan the MLS. I stay in tune with the new listings that came on the market and what closed, what came off the market, what expired. So that tells me what didn't work, right? Or maybe the condition was horrible. But studying your MLS makes you a better agent, makes you more prepared, makes you better equipped to handle the questions that your clients are going to have. So when you are dealing with people who are trying to relocate to your market, the MLS is going to tell you everything you need to know to help them make an informed decision. Right? You just have to take the time to learn it. You got to take the time to study it so that you can be knowledgeable and talk about it. You don't have to be a statistician. You know what the word is. You don't have to be an expert in it. You just have to have some key data points that are going to make you stand out from some other agents that don't bother to gather that information. They don't even know where to get it. So I hope that's been super helpful to you. Thanks for being here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to
My pleasure.
Happy to see your smiling face. I missed you. And you let me know if you need me for anything, okay?
Okay, I will.
All right.
Thanks,
Talk to
Laura.
you soon. Thanks, hon.
Okay.
Have a good day.
You too.